Not yet.
No.
Working on it. Waiting
Yeah.
for the right plane tickets to.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the most important thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because if you book them far enough out in advance, it's a little cheaper.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are you here for?
there.
Hey, how's
Are
it
you here for
going?
Mr. Tucker?
Yeah,
Good.
I came in and do a few things. Yeah, I'll stick around and see what he has to say.
You know what I mean? I left here at a closing yesterday and I ran out of here. And I don't know if you don't know. I ran out of here and I forgot. So I called back to see if Debbie could find me out. Of course, I didn't want to bother her. She goes,
Yeah.
oh, I'll do it for you.
Oh.
I said, no, I'll just be there too. Because
Yeah.
if he doesn't have anybody and he doesn't come, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So did your closing go well and your client excited?
They're excited, but
Are they purchasing or?
purchase.
Okay, yeah.
And it was her.
I've heard a lot of bad things.
Oh, yeah, I mean.
Heard a lot of bad things.
Yeah, and what, Justine texted me later on yesterday afternoon, I have to go. And so I'll let keep telling her, but she said everybody, and said, they were actually the worst. She said, it's gonna take days. They're gonna be so upset because their parents have come from West Virginia, came yesterday afternoon to help because they're gonna rip up the carpet and put down hardwood floors and all that. And if they can't get in,
Did it record?
no, because Waterstone screwed up. I mean, the purchaser, there was in the, I guess, last set of papers, they said the loan amount was way off, was wrong. She found it. She pointed to call Waterstone and said, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And so they fixed that, and Justine sent an email about it. And, but they didn't have the right papers, even though the husband, she's on the actual loan. He is taking title, but they didn't have any papers to have his name on it and all this. And then there were some other papers they still needed to get. I'll tell you, we can come close. Chip Royer is phenomenal.
Good, okay,
Oh my
that's good
goodness.
to know.
He's got humor.
Yeah.
He's good sense of humor, very professional. And even Keith said yesterday morning, he said, why don't you go do a pre-walkthrough, see if they're gone, the tenants are gone, or said, well, the place has been cleaned, it was wonderful.
Good.
But he said, anything goes on, anything that's not in sync, Chip is gonna find it, he's gonna get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was in his unpolite way, you could tell he was disgusted. I think he doesn't want anything to do with those people.
Yeah.
So they still had to wait for papers, they had to wait for the wire transfer. And he, explained to them that we'll try to get it done. He explained how they got backed up, getting things reported the day before, and so on and so on. And that they would send out an email, and that it could be this morning, but after Justine said take days, oh my God, I hope not. Especially since their families coming in.
Yeah. Oh, that's the worst.
I know. Of course, the Waterstone flew the papers to the attorney's office, had a form that they wanted filled out, I guess, on their performance, etc. And of course, she was saying, I've never seen this before. They're asking it to be done, but you don't have to do it. And she did, and when we walked out, we talked a little bit, and I said, so how did you feel about the whole Waterstone? And she said, yeah, they were nice people, but she goes, I found that thing, I had to point this out, and what happened in there, and there'll be another follow-up thing from Waterstone, and I hope she, if it
Be honest with
be
you.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I could tell, because Chip was here, and they were across, and I was here, and Keith was here. He was taking notes, but it was stuff that he also brought up, which I'm asked, I can't remember everything. At one point, Chip walked out to copy the driver's license, and he said, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna chime in on a couple things, it's like pay yourself, maybe cut down on these, and if you can put another month or two, make sure it goes to principal, just think a little odds and ends, and I guess those were things he was writing down, but I'm sure he was also writing notes about this, because the data was done. Oh, in the meeting, did you remember hearing her say she was gonna report them to Carr?
Yeah.
And he said, no, you're not. She goes, oh, yes, I am. Well, this is just more reason
Yeah.
to, I don't know what it is, whether they don't have good employees, they just don't know how to stay on a timeline, they don't pay attention. I don't know what it is, but, and I know it can be overwhelming, I'm
It
sure.
can, I don't think they have good, like you're saying, I don't think they have good systems in place. I don't think they have good training, I don't think they have good systems. One thing I like about Movement Mortgage is they have like a transaction management program. And then it's like, you get an email and it's a list of things. And then, as those things get completed,
The last
they get
couple of
checked
guys I
off.
did for that, and Ben kept sending me emails,
Yeah.
this is where we are at this point, this is what we've
and
accomplished.
this is what's next.
Right.
And yeah, it was just so nice to
And thorough.
see what you've done, see where you are, see what needs to be done next. And
Exactly.
it was pretty, so I think it's important to have systems like that in place, especially this time of year when everybody's just like crazy busy with so much to do.
And there, is that just a privately?
Yeah.
Whereas I think a Movement Mortgage being more of a, I don't know if they're East Coast National, whatever, or state, there are gonna be more things in place.
Yeah.
And they need work, and here I am, I don't know enough about this business yet and all that, but I could tell that there were issues, and I could tell from Chip Lawyer was not pleased with, And so I also I'm talking to Shalina when we were walking out, and I said, well, when Aaron, the husband, came and talked, I didn't realize that they had already talked to somebody. Or I asked him, I came down and spoke with him first. I said, do you have a mortgage company or anything? Well, hello there.
Hey.
How are you? Good morning.
Hello.
Morning, ladies.
How'd the big PT go?
Big PT, is This is supposed to be live streaming this, is that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
We're
It went really well.
Good.
She was really encouraged by where I was, but also made it very clear that there's a new normal for me.
Uh-huh.
I need to be taking it easy.
Right.
Because surprise, surprise, I want
push.
to push.
Yeah.
Push the limit.
And she reminded me again that beyond Borrego is not like overdoing.
Right.
So it was a good.
Just
Reminder.
a wake-up call, reminder,
Yeah. And this bladder infection thing, it's just, that's the really frustrating thing at this point.
Well, my father, when
Discomfort.
he was in the hospital and rehab from February 1st for 6 weeks and got that, and
I remember you.
yeah, and I mean, he still has a catheter.
Just really hard to knock it off.
Yeah.
Phil, I'll be right back.
Sure.
They told him a month ago and they went for a follow-up. Well, he's, I think, adapted to it. The thing is, he can't wear shorts anymore. We'll see. Figure something out. The scary thing is,
Is he really? Oh, no.
a cousin called me this morning, so I'm carrying on going around, cutting up vegetables and getting dressed and everything with on speakerphone. I said, do me a favor, because he was in a situation where he broke his ankle. And they told him to come drive. He's like, oh, Michael's fine. And they kind of laid it out and said, why? And when my father had already had Parkinson's, it kind of went over a little bit, but it didn't because then he started driving.
Yeah.
And I said, Doug, maybe you just call him, see how he's doing casually, you know, say something, thank goodness you're not driving, and see what he says. And then just bring up all the points that were told to him as to why he couldn't. One, thank you for, I was just kind of telling Megan.
Yeah.
And of course, Josie texted me last night. I said, well, you can cheat.
Actually, I think it went great.
No, but there were still some mess ups.
Yeah.
Somebody, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah,
Not
as
the
far as
ordeal, just that particular situation.
that particular lender goes, that wasn't a hiccup.
That's an ordeal.
That was below norm. That actually went much better than that.
Oh, really? Oh, well, okay. But I just told you, they've got family that came in yesterday, and they didn't get in. They still not, they don't get word.
Well,
said,
they got a key, don't they?
Just checks off stuff.
They got a key. What do you think, though? Geez, if they happen to go in and you don't know about it.
because they say community boxes, and I said, wait till Tuesday today and see what, see if you get that email. She'll probably text us.
More coming?
There might be.
There was one other.
Maybe John Updike, if you can get him off the phone.
That's not likely.
I haven't seen anybody else around.
So you haven't decided to stay home?
Keith's here, should we just start? I wonder, do y'all have anything y'all want to talk about? Any problems?
How about them Mets?
They're
They're not.
Did the Nationals beat them?
Yeah.
Did the Nationals finally win a game?
I was just trying to come up with something that would
Okay.
break the ice. Sonny Williams is not happy about
He does not want to go to.
New Orleans.
Orleans.
He stormed out at the pre-draft thing. He wants to go to the Knicks.
Well,
Yeah, the Knicks
wanna
were,
be-
all the fans were so upset.
You want to be in this top
So guys, you
professional.
are.
So upset.
That's all I know.
Wow.
Sounds like a baby already.
Right.
Oh, yeah. He's used to getting.
His wife, exactly.
What,
Yeah,
19?
You want to play with the big boys, you gotta learn to play with the big boys.
All right, well, let's get started. Maybe some people that are straggling behind, but
You know, we were just talking about, anybody have any subjects they wanted to talk about?
well, one thing that Bill and I were just talking about that I think is a good reminder is that one of the things that's so nice about an title in our joint venture is that we have Bill that we can reach out to and he can help us, through some things. But one thing that we need to be reminded of is we probably need to, because he has a big, obviously he's got a lot of clients, right? We need to, when we call him, to say, hey, here's my question, and this is the buyer and this is the seller, so he can see whether or not the seller, like if we're representing buyer and we're trying to get a little advice, there's oftentimes he may be on the other side of it. And because of that, he would need to recuse himself from that and not be able to, and in the situations, as far as just what does the contract say, it's one thing, but it's just a good reminder, and I had never even thought about it, that's a question that is probably worth asking, because we have the ability to, that he's really helpful, he's very responsive, he's helped me a number of different times helping you guys with different issues. So just, again, just a good reminder that, hey, I'm representing the buyer in this situation. The seller is such and such and being represented by this agent. So then he go, wait a minute. Unfortunately, I'm already representing the seller in that situation. And it happens. I mean, it happens for me from time to time that I'm working on something and I'm told that Bill's on the other side of it. So I would never reach out to him in that situation because of a conflict of interest.
So, and Ednam has other attorneys that can give advice.
Right.
And even if this particular agent had told me the name of the other side, I would not have recognized the name. It worked out okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
One thing I wanted to at least talk about was getting whoever, when you're representing a buyer, whoever is going to do the closing, you want to make sure that that title work is ordered as soon as possible. We have seen a rash of unreleased deeds of trust. I think just this week I've taken over, I think 2 from other settlement companies because they had unreleased deeds of trust and didn't know what to do with them because they were back in the chain of title, not even the current owner. And so the sooner you get that title ordered for the buyer, the sooner we're going to find out there's a problem we've got to deal with. That's another little plug for Ednam Title.
We've talked about this before.
If you use Ednam, then the title search will get ordered right away. As soon as the order comes in, it's ordered. And if for some reason inspection goes bad, the loan appraisal goes bad, and the deal doesn't close, there's no cost to the buyer. Which is something Ednam Title leads. So,
is that the usual, I mean, it's Edmund, if something goes wrong, the purchaser does not owe anything.
correct.
Is that with other title companies, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's a good thing to.
Well, the other thing that, again, we need to remember, and Megan and I had this conversation the other day, Charlottesville's a different animal in the fact that, I mean, a lot of ways it's a different animal, but, purchaser gets represented by somebody, seller gets represented by somebody. They close, they sign their paperwork in different places, right? Almost in every other part of the state, that's not the case. That like in Northern Virginia, you're in the same place. The buyer chooses the closing company or the attorney, and the seller and the buyer both meet around the table. The seller signs the deed and does whatever they're going to do, and then shakes hands on it, and hopefully hugs and leaves. And then the buyer does their paperwork, and once the paperwork's done, the keys are handed off. Well, that's not the case in Charlottesville. You talk to Bill, or you talk to Larry, or you talk to Chip, or you talk to whatever attorney. Everybody's got a different idea as to when the keys get, given. But if you've got a client coming from Northern Virginia, you need to educate them and say, hey, I know that this is the way it's been done up here, but it's not the way it's done down here. And so I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And unless you've experienced it, you wouldn't know that. If I spent all that time in Northern Virginia, I know that, I can tell you that. But if you've never worked with a Northern Virginia agent, why would you know that? Because the standard operating procedure here is one on one side, one on the other. And in my opinion, it's the better way to go because you got people, somebody representing both. And again, going back to what the whole point of this is if you've got a seller and you can get the seller to say, we're gonna use Bill Tucker or Hope Payne or Ralph Main or Paige Williams or Jeff Early or whoever, and we tell Jeff Early, hey, we're gonna use you. Well, they can do that pre-title search and get it all ready for you so that when you do get a contract, if there are issues, you know them way in advance and can get them resolved versus Friday. You're trying to close on Friday and you find out, and now you're cooked. So it's a great benefit.
If you're representing a seller and the buyer's coming from Northern Virginia, you may not till after the contract's signed, maybe not until after the inspection's done. But at some point, you're gonna wanna let that other realtor know, hey, things are not done the same way as they're done in Northern Virginia. Because in Northern Virginia, that realtor is expecting that the buyers, usually it's a settlement company, is going to handle everything, including the real estate commission checks. So, and as Michael said, you're at the closing table, the key is handed at that point to the buyer because the buyer's signed the papers. The money hasn't changed hands, the deed hasn't been recorded, and they will not record the same day like we try to do here. So that Fredericksburg company representing somebody buying an Albemarle is going to have everything signed. Let's say it's Thursday. They're going to have everything signed on Thursday. They're going to expect their buyer to get the key. Your seller has given up possession. Maybe they'll get the deed, they'll take the deed and they'll send it to somebody. They're called remote title searchers. Probably somebody in Albemarle that's on their list, and that person will go record, but that won't be till Monday. So we closed on Thursday. The buyer has access to the property. The money is sitting up in Fredericksburg. The deed and the deed of trust gets recorded on Monday, and then maybe on Tuesday they'll disperse. And when they disperse, they'll be paying off the loan for the buyer and for the seller, and they'll be mailing you your real estate commission check, which due to the mail you'll get on the following Wednesday.
If you're lucky.
Not at all. So at some point in time, it's what we try to do is we try to get the realtors, if they can, to educate the Northern Virginia realtor. Hey, pick a local settlement company, not somebody you're used to in Fredericksburg. The closing's down here. Let us do it down here our way, because otherwise it's just a mess.
And I will tell you my personal experience, and obviously a long time ago, but when I bought my house here in 2005, I had a friend, done a lot of business up in Northern Virginia. I said, I want you to handle this. And he said, you do not want to handle this. I said, yes, I do. I want you to handle it because I trust you. And he said, I do not know Charlottesville and what their situations are. And I made an absolute mess of it. That it was just so much harder for me to have them representing me, the buyer, working with, somebody here. It was just dumb. But I was, smart. Been in business forever. And I wanted my representation my way. And instead of it being a good thing, it ended up being, it caused a problem for everybody. And it didn't need to be that way.
If we don't have a topic, can I toss one out?
Yeah.
So this is a
We're
constant.
going to vote on it.
You're chairing, correct? This is a constant discussion between Yona and I. And this is in reference.
We don't do personal problems.
You're on point today.
You sure this with him?
This is in reference to loan commitment, right? And the language in 5B. So my wife and I have a difference of opinion that if I'm representing a buyer, if the seller's agent does not request a loan commitment by the date in the contract, right? Nor do we're wishing to terminate the contract by the date in the contract. What happens after that? So my argument is that the loan contingency goes all the way to closing.
There is, if the seller has requested the commitment terminated, or the buyer who said, I can't get a loan, I want to terminate,
By this date.
then I call it an evergreen clause. There's a clause that says, well, then that date will just continue until either you get the commitment or the seller gives notice that I need to see that commitment and I have to see it in 3 days or I'm terminating.
So therefore, after that date, if the seller gives us this letter, we still have to provide it within 3 days.
Correct.
And then if we do not provide it in 3 days, the seller has the right to terminate.
So they have right to cut the evergreen clause off.
So our
And
buyer,
I think it's 3 regular days. I don't think it's business days. I don't remember.
it just says 3 days.
Yeah.
3 days.
So the buyer's right to terminate the contract unilaterally expires.
I think it expires.
The seller's right to request the loan commitment letter does not expire on that date.
Correct.
And that he or she can issue a demand notice, for lack of a better term, for that. And if the buyer doesn't produce that within 3 days, I asked this question specifically because it's something you and I are currently working on, which you don't know about yet.
Leona is listening.
Yes.
Just so you know.
Well, that would have been a real good piece of information before
I
I.
just found out. She just texted me and says, good to see me. So
Well-
she's obviously live streaming.
So, unbeknownst of you sharing that with me, I was going to publicly say my wife was right and I was wrong.
Okay.
Very good.
Because I took the position that the seller lost its right to do that.
Seller has
So
every-
Yona is correct.
Yes.
But the notice has to be given or it'll go all the way to closing. And if something
Go-
changed for the buyer can get out because they didn't give the notice.
So we have a,
Why don't, the buyer can't get out until they don't get the loan.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That 3 days before closing, all of a sudden something happens and they can't get the loan. If they didn't, that finance institution is following them along unless that seller
Exactly.
gave them that notice within,
Exactly.
and said you have 3 days.
so we have a FISBO transaction we're working with Valerie on. And it's a doc buying it. BOA told me 2 days ago, we're not gonna give you the loan. We're way beyond that because BOA would not accept.
I don't know if does that FISBO contract have that language in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the BOA would not give the loan because BOA would not accept the contract from UVA for the doc.
Go to SunTrust.
Yeah, we pivoted, we found somebody.
Okay.
So the thing was difficult for me because it's actually Kathleen Madison. I couldn't coach her, I couldn't do anything, so I encouraged her to seek legal, she needed to figure this out on her own. But if you wish to submit us a letter, you need, that is your right within the contract to do that. So and I told her, I said, if you do that, you will more than likely lose the sale. Because we probably could not provide that within 3 days. So she chose not to do that.
Good.
But anyway, I just wanted to make sure, because I understood this completely.
So like the same thing with the HOA package. It's got to be delivered. There's no time frame when. If you get to closing and it's not been delivered, it's too late.
The buyer accepts all the terms and conditions.
Mhm.
So anyway, thank you for allowing me
And of course, my advice always is immediately when that contract's signed, get the HOA packet. Don't wait for inspection, don't wait for
There is a
anything.
time frame though, isn't it in the contract about getting the HOA to, did it used to be?
No, I mean, you're thinking that there used to be some,
Language.
not in a contract, but by law, it had to be received within 15 days. That the homeowner association had to provide it within 15 days.
And the limit, how much they can charge and all
But
that.
I'm not
stuff.
sure that
It may not be there anymore, but again,
The 15 days is still there. The HOA has to deliver it once in 15 days, once it's requested.
Request.
it may not
That's
have to be
application.
paid for.
Request,
It
yeah.
might say it has to be paid.
It has to be paid for, it has to be delivered within 15 days. There's nothing in the contract that says the seller must provide it by a certain, unless you write it in the deal.
Yeah, no, she.
But you have a certain amount of days after you receive it to review it and
Right.
accept, or, yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
free to make, that's.
But
that's-
you
Yeah,
were
that's
saying
fine.
that if the packet doesn't come before closing, the buyer has to accept,
Well, it's too late.
it's too late.
Yeah.
It's too
So
late.
from a representation of a buyer, if we need to let our buyer know that, hey, we didn't get this package and we're about ready to close. If you close, then you accept everything that's in there. So we either need to reach out to Bill and delay closing, right? Or the buyer makes a decision to accept it.
And I think even more than that, let's say you've got a 45-day closing. Today's May 16th, so you got a June 30th, well, June 26th closing, because you never want to close on the last day of the month if you can help it. A little tip there. But, and you don't get it in 15 days. Well, the buyer has the right to say, if I don't have this within a certain time, then I reserve the right to withdraw from this contract because I never got the documents. And you can put the pressure. Now, unfortunately, for sometimes it's the seller and listing agent, they don't have any control because it's some mom and pop homeowners deal that, you know, they don't care, you know? And so, but that's the leverage the buyer has. And I wouldn't wait, and I wouldn't say, and Keith was saying this, but I wouldn't wait till the last minute to say, hey, Bill, we need to delay closing. I would, after the 15 days or 3 weeks or whatever, I would be saying, look, we don't have these. We're supposed to close in 3 weeks. We're not going to close. Seller, listing agent, we're not closing without them. So figure it out. And that way you give them a lot of advance notice. So it's not the day before or whatever saying, you know, whatever. They understand that if I don't have the documents, and
So the client care coordinator, Justine, she will put it on your calendar to make sure that that conversation happens 2 to 3 weeks prior to closing. How come we didn't get the HOA done? If you're representing the.
Does delivery to the agent start the 3 days?
It
Great
depends on
question.
if you, I mean, that's what that last page of the listing agreement is, right?
contract.
Contract.
You got it.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you, well, Bill, support me or not on this, if you don't clearly delineate that the delivery is to the seller, then you put yourself in the gray. Because if it comes here and you're the agent that represents the buyer, then some people would say technically the clock starts when they get it to the agent who represents the buyer. And the problem with that is if you're out of town, it comes in here on a Friday and you're in the Outer Banks and it's in your mailbox. But you could be in a situation where the 3 days tick away and your buyer doesn't have the right to do anything. So it's another reason why I know everybody says I can work from wherever. It's another reason why you want somebody covering for you. So if something comes in, like something like that, you know, you can reach out to the agent and say, hey, we got this package. Do you want us to open it? But you can make it, you know, you can put in the language that delivery is not until the seller or the buyer receives it. And then that would
Which you have to write that in, that's not a given.
Is it often done by email now? Did they get their packet?
Yeah, most of
It
them.
just
are email.
depends, yeah.
And
So you would
sometimes-
just push it on.
In some occasions, the agent does not want to accept the HOA. They want to stay out of it, and it goes straight from the HOA department to the purchaser. No.
But you gotta write that in
And
to make
that's
sure
right.
that happens.
That's right.
But if
But I see it a lot.
the risk is that most people don't write it in, and if you get it because you're an agent of the buyer, that probably counts as delivery.
Sometimes it's even just cost, that word agent's cost.
You have something to share?
I do. So one of the concerns about not seeing it as the buyer's agent, Lake Monticello in particular, if there's a violation in it, financial or otherwise, and you don't see it, right? And your client doesn't say there's a violation in this package, or it gets missed, or somewhere along the line that information isn't shared with the closing agent or whatever, then they inherit that violation. So for instance, Lake Monticello, like you have to power wash your house, you have to cut trees down, they built a shed that was never approved,
Too many leaves in the yard.
too many leaves in the yard, it's getting worse, right?
Ah,
And, or they owe $45,000, well, you'll catch that, but they owe thousands of dollars in back They may not catch that.
Mm.
10,000, I think. If you don't know, if you don't, and that this almost happened to us the other,
Agent doesn't
we don't
it.
see that, and then we don't call,
Yeah.
and they don't notify you, they just inherited it.
Buyer, same with buyer beware.
Well, and again, I guess the question I have as far as like Marcella, that in any homeowner association, if you inherit that, you're gonna have to deal with it when you sell it. So like a satellite dish or something that if it didn't get caught, well, wait, nobody told me I had to do that. Well, too bad. It's when you go to sell it and they catch it the next time, you are gonna be responsible for taking care of it. In Lake Monticello, do they enforce it right away? Do they come to you and say?
They don't come back and check.
That has changed.
They're coming
They're
back.
coming back. They hired somebody to do that.
Oh, okay.
I have a question about,
Don't you better shut up then?
Yeah,
I have a question about,
they just told us they don't come back.
I literally
Okay,
just had that happen.
good. That's better. We try to get somebody to come back to make sure something been fixed correctly, and they say, nope.
Really?
But hey, I like it, your answer's better.
If mine was yesterday evening, yours was yesterday morning.
You did a question.
I have a question about liens. So I have a client, they're selling their house, just received a contract, and they're worried that a prior contractor may put a lien on their house. Long story, but what happens if the title search is done and then the lien comes in like the day prior to closing?
Well, then we would stop the closing, but let's say what happens if it comes in the day after closing? Because if a supplier or a material, somebody doing work on the house, they actually can file a lien up to, it's a certain, depends on what month they worked in, and it's to the end of, we call it 123 days. There's actually one point in the year that you could file a lien 123 days later and it would be valid. But typically it's 3 months.
Because it's basically a mechanics lien, right? So that's.
Mechanics lien.
Yeah.
So those liens can be filed after closing. So what we do, and it's actually in the contract, some language about it, we get the seller to sign an affidavit saying there are no unpaid people. So in fact, if that lien appears, the seller actually is sworn to something that's not true. But it still becomes the buyer's problem.
Right.
So if you as an agent have some knowledge that there may be some unpaid, somebody out there, let who's ever doing the closing know about it, because we would want to get that, we want to get that resolved, so it doesn't happen 2 months after the close.
And they don't think it's gonna happen. I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, yeah, long story, but, so how do you get notified that lien's been placed? I mean.
Well, they have to, they have to give notice to the owners of the property
Okay,
when they file it. They have to give notice to any people who have mortgages.
okay. So they own the home free and clear.
They would get, if this contractor files a lien, he has to send that notice.
So typically they would just serve them papers. They come knock on the door, serve papers and say, we're taking you to court, kind
Well,
of thing.
actually, the way it works in Virginia, there are 2 steps. One is just filing the lien.
Okay,
And that usually, there's no service of that. That's just mailed to the homeowner.
okay,
Within 6 months of filing the lien, you have to, we call it perfect the lien, which means you have to go to court.
okay.
So that gives a 6-month period of time to try to work it out if you could.
Okay.
Get a lawyer
Yeah,
for those people.
yeah, I will, yeah. Certainly.
When we were talking about the financing contingency, that brought up another thing that we see a lot. Well, a couple of things. One is in the contract, it requires the seller to provide proof of the cash to close. Now, we only think that that's really when it's a cash closing, but it's actually any cash. It doesn't, I think it doesn't qualify it at all. You have to provide evidence or you're swearing that you have sufficient cash to close. So I'm amazed at the number of cash contracts that I get where nobody's verified the cash.
It's 5 days in the contract, right? Yeah.
They haven't verified it yet? Wow. So everybody just assumes
I
that.
haven't had an occasion, I knew the guy was, I got the contract and I had represented the buyer before and he had defaulted. So I get the contract on behalf of representing the seller. And I say to the the seller, I say to the realtor, look at your contract, look at paragraph 5, make sure you follow it. And the realtor did not, and 3 months later, same thing happened with this guy. So
you're
but
saying,
I think it counts for, like, let's say you're putting 20% down.
Yeah.
You start to verify that. I
okay,
don't think anybody does that. I bet y'all
no.
don't preach that, do you?
Well, we don't in that situation because if it's 20% down, that
The
becomes in the
lenders do.
financing contingency that if they did try to get out of the contract by saying they can't qualify
Mhm.
because they don't have 20%
Right,
in,
they'd be
well,
breaching.
then that would be, default because,
Right.
basically fraud, really, because they misled the fact that they,
Well, one of the things that it says in there about all the different things that that they agree to when they're applying for the loan, it says they have the cash.
That's right.
exposed to.
that's right.
The balance of the purchase price is in excess of the deposit to be paid in cash without third party or seller financing. Purchaser shall give the seller with written verification from purchaser's bank or other sources within 15 days. After the date of contract is fully ratified, that the purchaser can balance, blah, 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 blah. Seller may terminate this contract by giving purchaser written notice within 10 days after the date of verification is given. So you can basically got this 25 days.
So, somebody's only putting 3% down, I guess you don't worry about that. If they're putting,
Well, I think the seller financing covers that. Right,
But
it
wouldn't
says
the lender
without
check
third
to
party
make
or
sure they
seller
have
No.
that 20% down for?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to Jay yesterday. Jay is going to be on my radio show Saturday, and we were talking about this very thing that he had somebody who has $10,000 in cash, and he said to her, "Do not deposit that in your bank account because we have to be able to have a trail for where that came from." She said, "Well, I got a check for such and such, and I took this cash out for whatever reason she took it out." Well, too bad, he said, "At this point, I want you to give the $10,000 to your mom and have them gift it to you so that we can have, a trail on it." But the point being is, they're not only going to verify the fact that that money's in the account, they're going to verify where it came from.
Yeah.
And so, again, different topic because it's probably more on Jay's side, but when Becca bought her house a couple of years ago, I forget what we did, but we did something. And the way we had to, I guess we gifted some money. But anyway, the hoops that we had to jump through in regards to money that I already had in my account, and took it out for this. Well, I had to, have something from 60 days before showing what the balance was, and then this, and then, I mean, there were like 2 or 3 different hurdles that Jay had to go through to make sure that, the underwriter of the loan was going to, verify and accept that money as a gift. So, yeah, there's a lot that goes there to verify where it came from, I mean, that they have it, and that they have it legitimately.
Yeah.
No more of these, unless you're paying cash, no more of these things where somebody brings a paper bag in with cash in it, and I had that happen a couple times when I was an agent, this was 100 years ago, where a Korean family brought the money in cash that people had donated to them, to do their down payment. I mean, the Korean community is incredible. I don't know if they still do it, but in this situation, every quarter, they all donated X amount of money, and every quarter they drew a name out of a hat. And as long as somebody's willing to buy within this community, they would give them money for the down payment.
Wow.
And,
That's very interesting.
so they'd come in with bags of cash, and the attorney would just go, "No!" And let's go to 7-Eleven and get, a cashier's check or a money order or something. So,
well, if you have more than $10,000, it gets reported to the IRS.
Yeah.
Yep. which is always a problem.
Can I go back to the HOA?
Sure.
So something that if we have available to us is acknowledged receipt of HOA by the purchaser.
Oh, yeah.
We do this on some of the bigger ones like LMOA and, you know, some of the smaller ones, it's not that important, but particularly when they are digitally sent over, we will send a copy of this over for the purchaser to sign it, and then we deliver it to the other side and say, we've now acknowledged receipt. The contract will say, Alex, right, is the buyer. We'll deliver it, we'll send this along with it, we'll have Alex sign it, and then we'll send it off to the other side and say, here you go. So then the time and date on this will start to 3 days. So I would use it originally written in 08, but they reviewed it in 18, which means it was fine as is. So I would go if you want. But I would encourage you, you know, the $100 one, $200 ones, I don't really mess with, but you know, the bigger ones, we tend to do that. Was that on point?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah,
Don't forget to send to the settlement agent all of your addendums to the contract. I think this might like
I'll follow up with what you're saying.
Hey, hon.
It's a great point that Bill's making is that once you get a contract ratified and you provide the paperwork like you all do in a timely fashion, especially after you get the nice gentle nudge at the end of the month saying, hey, we need your paperwork. Oftentimes we forget when we get a release, like releasing the homeowner's documents, there's a form that everybody signs. That needs to go in the file. It also needs to go to and that's another reason why using Justine as a client clerk, she will do all that for you. And it's $150 or something for the whole, you know, and doesn't charge you if it doesn't go to closing. But she'll do all the processing of the paperwork and everything and make sure all these things happen. But the point being is, release the homeowner's documents, that needs to go there. Removal of home inspection contingency, that needs to go in there. And I find time and time again, when I'm going through the contracts, those aren't in there because they're after the fact and we forget. And so I think where Bill was going with this is at closing, oftentimes he won't know that the home inspection was negotiated and that there's a $3,000 closing cost credit, right? Because of things that were found wrong in the property and the way that they removed the home inspection is they did it by money versus getting them repaired. And we forget to get that, to the closing company. And so now you've got a situation where you're delaying closing and that kind of thing. And if it's a high enough number, I'm going to say it's 3% change. Is that right, Bill? Is with the TRID, with the 3% change in the closing statement that it needs to be delayed for 3 days?
It's an eighth of a point, and I don't remember the percentage number, but very rarely do we run into that.
Well, where I was going, I was just trying to follow up with what you said about getting all the paperwork to you guys, because sometimes home inspection contingency will be removed with a $3,000 closing cost credit that they forget to tell you guys about, and then all of a sudden.
Oh, yes, that happens amazingly.
But if it's a high enough number, it could delay settlement by 3 days.
Well, that's going down if you get in a closing cost credit.
Oh, okay.
So that's okay.
Okay.
So I mean, I can't think of one recently that we've ever had because of the change, a delay in closing. It's funny when the new law got passed, we all thought that when they send the CD out, the closing disclosure 3 days in advance, that meant you had a clear to close. So now on Monday, the CD is going out for a Friday closing. We figured, oh great, we'll have loan papers on Wednesday. Well, the reality is what happens is the lenders, and this is about half of them, movement is different, fortunately, but about half of them on Monday will put the CD together. They may not consult with us about what the title costs or what our fees are or whether the prorations are right. Now, we send information into them early on, but of course that's guessing the closing date. So they are in a rush to get the CD out. They'll get the CD out on Monday, and then they'll send it to us on Tuesday so we can balance. So now all of a sudden, we're telling them, well, you got this number wrong and that number wrong. So we're going back and forth Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Finally, we get the right number. So now we're telling the buyer, well, what you got on Monday isn't quite right, it's this figure. And that's probably half the closing. I mean, actually, I asked my staff once, because I was teaching another seminar from contract to closing, and I said, what percent of them change? They said about 95%. So what they get on Monday isn't going to be the actual number, but it typically will not cause a delay in closing.
Okay, I have a question, not legal. How long have you had those sandals?
These are worn in.
No, how long have you had them?
These particular pair, a couple of years.
Oh, okay, because I had a pair just like that in high
Buffalo
school.
sandals. Yeah.
Yeah,
They-
1970 something.
They're called buffalo sandals.
Yeah. I didn't even know they made them
I
anymore.
have 3 or 4 spares. You can go get them online.
Sorry, Courtney.
I'm pretty sure you got them from Moses.
No, you
Yeah.
can get them.
Moses.
Just wear, it's like wearing nothing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't know they were made anymore. Where did you buy them?
Buffalo sandals, just go Google buffalo sandals.
Google Buffalo.
About $20.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah, they're great. But you gotta wet them and then it molds your feet.
I still think you got it from Moses.
Yeah, it's funny, I just took that back into one of the shoe repair guys. He said, oh, you're back again. Because they always fall apart and I'm getting into a sewn back or glue back.
Is that Rack Room
Huh?
that you go to, Rack Room?
Now I go to the one on over where nobody lives anymore.
Seminole Square.
Yeah.
Oh,
That guy, that guy. Oh my
He's
gosh.
still there?
I mean, we're way off topic now, but if you've never been in there, it's worth just going. It's a small, it's not as big as this table. And there are shoes everywhere. So you go in and got back, here to get my shoes. Okay, tell me again what they look like.
Nice old man.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's great. He says $8. I started out, here's 15.
Yeah.
You realize you can buy a new pair.
$20.
I'm just saying.
You have to wear them in.
I have parts too, they'll fall apart.
So you take in supplies.
You know, it's only a $5 difference.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go.
No.
I didn't mean to go to sock camp.
So we talked about the addendums.
Dude, really?
Ridiculous. Make sure they're signed by everybody.
What other things are going on? What do you have there that you wanted to pass out?
Well, I was just I didn't know if you guys ever seen a closing statement. Some of y'all have been here a long time. This is what we would have passed. This is what we do differently than the Northern Virginia closing. So this is a statement, because we have two settlement agents. This is a statement between the settlement agents as to how we're going to handle certain things regarding the transaction. And it outlines some of the financial terms of the transaction, like prorating the real estate taxes, and seller pays grantor tax. So these numbers on the top will all match up with numbers in the CD. This is not, this is the way we calculate how much money the other side needs to wire to us. Because if we sold the property for 105, they're going to only wire 103 to us. But the notes are important because that's how we move forward with the closing. For note 1 talks about real estate taxes. They're being prorated. So we want to make sure that the buyer knows who's now responsible for the next tax that comes due. And so right now when we're doing closings, actually it starts in April. When we start doing closings in April, one of the costs that's involved is the buyer, if they're getting a mortgage, there's not enough time to set the escrow account up. So we're having to pay taxes in April that are due in June for the buyer. But this one just talks about, that the buyer will be responsible for the December tax. Now, if they're escrowing with the mortgage, they're not going to pay that. Number 2 talks about reporting the sale to the IRS. In Northern Virginia, the buyer's attorney reports the sale to the IRS. Here, the seller's attorney does, because we believe they're two settlement agents. Buyer has one, seller has one. Number 3 talks about the way we do closings, and I think of it like a domino, and y'all have seen it. We got all these dominoes that have to fall into place. You know, the first domino I always like to think is the buyer and the realtor doing that inspection. Now, that inspection may not be the first thing that happens. You actually may not do the inspection until after the seller moves out, which may be after you sign the loan papers, but that domino has to pass. The loan papers have to come in from the bank, and remember I was talking about we don't get the papers, so there's a clear to close, and typically if we have a closing on Thursday, we're lucky if we get the papers on Wednesday. It's probably Thursday morning we get the loan papers. So we have to have loan papers. Buyer has to come in and sign. Buyer has to wire us money. Bank has to wire us money. Then we wire money to the seller's attorney. The seller's attorney gives us the deed, and then we go record in the clerk's office. So those are all the steps that have to happen. Usually this, goal is same day. Usually it may fall on the second day to record. That's why we talk about, when does the buyer get his keys? Seller can't get his money until after we recorded, but the buyer says, well, I've done everything I need to do at the closing table. I've delivered my money. I've signed my loan papers. Can't I have the keys now? We don't have a hard and fast rule as to when to give them out.
So do you hear what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
No hard and fast rules. So again, the beauty of having an attorney or a closing company that you work with regularly is you know what they're going to say. So the key is to educate your client. You're not going to get your keys until the recordation, or once the seller signs off, and so we know this, the seller will give us permission to give you keys. That's the key. Don't get wrapped around the axle on the fact that some give you the keys and some don't. Just know, and if you're somebody that you want the keys at the table, then you better find an attorney or a credit company that's going to help you do that. I mean, simple as that.
And have a plan B, especially if you're closing on Friday.
Right.
So you do the month before a 3-week holiday.
But that's my point, is if it's a Friday and they're thinking they're moving in that day, if you've told them a month before or when they did this, this attorney, I know the seller's attorney is not going to give you the keys. So we're going to have a plan B. That's what you want. You want them to already know that. It's what I call safe islanding people. They're going to go, oh, that's right, you told me that a month ago. So what can we do to work something out? And you may not be able to get, the access to the property, but you may be able to get the seller to allow you to move stuff in. You just need to know.
Or you basically work with the other side and find out when you have the keys.
Exactly.
And a lot of time you have the key because you've gone and done the inspection at 10. You've shown up at the lawyer's office at 11:30. You have the key, and you may have instructions once they've signed everything, turn the key over. I actually don't have a problem with that. I believe that if the buyer has done everything they're supposed to do, they've signed their loan papers, they've initiated their wire, we know the bank's going to wire us money, give the buyer, he's done his inspection, give him the key.
Yeah.
The rest of it's kind of the dominoes we're in control of.
But the other thing that Bill just said is, again, from a perspective of just trying to do things in a reasonable time frame, don't do the walkthrough at 10 o'clock if your closing's at 11:30. Do it the night before. Get the seller to allow you to come in and do the walkthrough the day before, the afternoon before. Because if you find something, they're not out yet, and they may still be moving out, but you can run by right before closing and make sure they're out. But if you find something that is not working now, that was working at the home inspection, now you've got 24 hours to figure out how you're going to resolve it. Whereas if you get it come in there at 11:30, say, hey, we just did the walkthrough and the toilet's leaking, or whatever, you're just putting everybody in an awkward place. So do that walkthrough the day before, and then do a quick walkthrough just to make sure everything's out, that they haven't left you those wonderful 2x4s and cinder blocks on the back. Oh, I thought you'd want those to put a bookcase in the basement, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that.
Sure.
So we do our own walkthrough prior to closing. but I like to do the final walkthrough just before with the client. And we did this yesterday, we helped with Logan, and Logan took a look at it by herself before she did the final walkthrough. Because at that point, as you said, if there's a problem, we want to deal with it
Right.
24 hours in advance. I like to do the walkthrough just before because, something stupid happens overnight or whatever, and it's not on me to make that call. It's with the client at that point. So that's how I do it. Just do it.
Well, but you're still doing something 24 hours in advance to make sure, yeah.
We do some sort of pre-walkthrough for articles.
And because whatever you don't find, it becomes the buyer's problem.
Well, and do you also suggest that the seller's agent also kind of do a pre-walkthrough too, just to make sure, hey, you forgot to get, to tell their seller, hey, you forgot to get the cinder blocks off the back porch, or, I mean.
That's really up to you. I think what I would do is just keep that listing agent informed. Hey, we're gonna do those, again, you need to ask the listing agent, can seller permission to come and walk to the house at 3 p.m. today for the settlement tomorrow. You need to get that permission anyway.
Yeah.
And then when you get there, you can then afterwards say, hey, everything looks great, except there does seem to be some stuff collecting on the back porch. And I just want to make sure that when we come back tomorrow, that stuff is going to be gone.
But as the seller's agent, we want to make sure that all this is done long before that. Is that what you were speaking?
Yeah, like should a
From the
seller's
seller
agent
yeah, absolutely.
do a pre-walkthrough before the buyers do a walkthrough, just to make sure there's no, especially if their clients like moved out of town, a week ago kind of thing, and.
Tell them not to, make sure they don't turn the utilities off.
Yeah.
When they left town. And make sure you have copies of all the receipts and, invoices for repairs.
So good point, Bill, there with the utilities. Let the seller, I wouldn't turn those utilities off until after the recordation of the property. Because the buyer is going to get the utilities in their name. But the contract is very clear that the utilities have to be in place until closing. And for any walkthroughs and things like that, it's amazing how many people, it's the 16th, that was my last day, I turned them off. Well, they turn them off at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And then at 10 o'clock, you go to do your walkthrough and you got no electricity, or you got no water, or whatever the case may be. So one, just tell them to keep it through and just verify with the buyer that they've transferred them into their name. Second thing is, in my opinion, do not cancel your hazard insurance policy as a seller until you know that until you've got your money. If you've got your money, that means it went to record and it's legally in somebody else's property. You do not want in those 24 hours and 48 hours something to fire a sign, and you don't have hazard insurance.
Yeah, you can always cancel it retro. In other words, if you closed on the 15th and you don't call until the 20th, you just tell them cancel on the 15th. And they actually won't cancel it until they receive the information from the mortgage company. The mortgage anyway.
Okay.
My client a month ago, when he called to have his, to give the electric company all this information, they told him something I'd never heard before. They said, tell the seller that the breaker has to be off before we can flip it into your name.
Where was this?
Here in Sherwood Manor Townhome.
Off of Old Lynchburg Road.
Is that at Dominion? Or
Yeah.
Rappahannock?
Then some power companies will require it.
Yeah.
You gotta power off and power back on.
Yeah.
Most of them are electronically transferred now. That's probably one of the ones that the electrical, the digital meters probably have not been swapped out. No, excuse me, I apologize. The new digital meters have not been Wi-Fi installed. It's an old school.
So they don't want an arc, right? So what that is. Yeah.
It becomes a fire hazard.
Anything else?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good stuff.
Yes, thank you.
I'll give you that question. They let me know if I'm doing the other side.
That's right. Careful, it's still, the video's still on. You don't want anybody that feels like he doesn't know what he's doing. Good to see you guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Have a good one. Enjoy the
Thank you.
beautiful
Thank you.
weather.
Those shoes.
You all
That's
right?
all I'm missing.
You okay?
Just hurt looking at. Hard to get a pair now.
You too. We're just still in a holding pattern.
Yeah, long holding pattern.
Okay, that's all right. Just keep checking, making sure I'm not missing anything.
I was thinking about emailing Kim, Kim, and just, just to touch base together because they have a wedding coming up and just see how.
Oh, is that
things-
coming up? That hasn't happened
They
already?
have two.
Two, right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
just to, just to touch base and see how things were going. And,
Good, good. Everything's good.
Did you ask him about the Brunos? Wait, did you ask him about the Brunos?
No, I asked him about money. I wanted to sponsor my show.
You were so funny. I saw,
What the heck's wrong with you?
Pear Smith and Company was a sponsor.
Yeah, look at this. Did you hear our intro music and all that stuff?
No.
Oh, yeah, we're excited. At least I am. Take you off now. Hey, good. I heard you had a bad one. Me too. I got accused of being, my values were wrong and being offensive to minorities. Then I proceeded to tell her to go fuck herself. So maybe that was part of the problem.
It might have been, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I fired Nicole. So we're not going to be working with Nicole. I can't deal with her shit anymore.
Do we need to remove the listings?
We're gonna regroup after I get back on vacation, come with a transition plan. She's uncomfortable with me, she feels that I'm offensive. And I have a problem with it because they are making decisions, and doing things that affects my license, that affects except they're using my Class A license.
Yeah.
That affects my license, and there's things they're doing that puts me in liable. We're done. So so it'll come off after.
Okay.
I saw this comment, we just, you know, apparently she considers herself a minority. Mathematically, there's more females in the world than there are males, so therefore, by definition, you're a minority. But apparently, she feels she's a minority.
Wow.
I'm offensive to minorities. And
Wow.
I said, well, why don't you come up to my house on Sunday?
Yeah.
Take a look at all my Latino sister-in-laws and African-American and Jewish people. Tell me if I got a problem with minorities.
Yeah.
And so that was the same day that you had yours.
Oh.
I thought, it's okay.
Oh.
I'm actually extremely happy about it. It's been a drain. I actually, you know, when she started copping her little millennial attitude, I said, we're done. Goodbye. We're ending this. Got up and walked out. Then I got this offensive thing.
Wow.